I am live. I'm reading A Lot to Remember. It is largely a travel journey through France by Joan Marshall Grant. It was dedicated to Denys and Charles with love for A Lot to Remember. It was published in 1962, and I am here at chapter 6, and she is describing Rose Red Village. If Denys and I followed the N20 through Limoges, which, although it is a large town, takes only 10 minutes, we should have reached Brive in under 2 hours and found the scenery increasingly pleasing with every kilometre of that excellent road. However, we made a long detour to Chalut, because I wanted to see the castle where Richard Coeur de Lion received his mortal wound. Richard the Lionheart. He was laying siege to the place only because an antique gold statue had recently been unearthed in a nearby field, and the owner of the castle, believing it to have miraculous powers, refused to hand it over to his liege. Richard was enjoying a quiet evening stroll within bowshot of the walls, no doubt believing that none of the defenders would be so foolhardy as to disturb the royal meditations, when a sentinel on one of the watchtowers could not resist so tempting a target and scored a gold in the king's shoulder. The castle instantly surrendered, and Richard, who had seen many men die of sepsis after an arrowhead had been cut out, sent for his assailant to congratulate him on his marksmanship and to grant him a full pardon. Regrettably, Eleanor, the Queen Mother, who reached Richard 4 days later only in time to watch him die, was too distraught to respect her son's clement wishes, and had the over-eager archer executed. Contrary to my expectations, all that remains of the castle is part of a tower, which is now an unsalubrious farmyard. We had also been unlucky in my choice of a restaurant for lunch. So by the time we were descending the long hill into Brive, I was wondering whether we might be equally disappointed with Cologne, where we intended to spend a couple of nights. As I am used to Denys knowing my thoughts, I was not surprised when he said briskly, "You look tired and I am hungry. Perhaps we should do better to spend the night here to restore our energies before exploring." To give myself time to think, I pretended to be concentrating on the town plan in the Guide de Michelin, which was open on my lap. Had I romanticized Cologne when describing it to him? I had spent only a brief hour there 4 years ago, before the hotel was finished, and I had seen very little of the village because Charles was in a hurry and it was raining. But I had lunch that I could go back. But I had had a hunch that I should go back there and be happy. "We shall be in Cologne in about half an hour," I said encouragingly. "Cross the river. It's the Courriers. Fork left at the marketplace, and then look out for a sign on the left to Maysac D38. As wilting hydrangeas are revived by rain, so were we revived by the joy of that road to Cologne. There are more grandiose landscapes, but their skin of scenery is tightly stretched over the bones of form, as though not a yard of the material of beauty could be wasted. But here it seems that there was so much beauty that it was prodigally used. The billowing embroidered silk allowed to fall lightly into its folds. Within minutes of arriving at the Relais Saint-Jacques de Compostelle, we knew that our stay there would be longer than a couple of nights, and in fact we were cosseted by Monsieur and Madame Richier for 5 weeks. I had almost decided on a bedroom with a view of the medieval gateway and one of the little chateau, which, like the rest of the village, is built of stone, the colour of dried rose petals, and has its towers capped with lavender slates. When Denys found that the rooms on the other side of the corridor looked out to a vista even more enchanting of curving fields and walnut orchards, that became our constant delight. There are 6 bedrooms upstairs and 2 on the ground floor, and their simplicity, a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a built-in hanging cupboard, and a basin and bidet, with really hot running water, was already a sign that we had found our favorite kind of hotel. Experience having proved that an elaborate decor is too often associated with inferior cooking. On that first night we had terrine maison, served wafer-thin pancakes, several wafer-thin pancakes filled with mushrooms in a truffle sauce, a platter of delectable little trout, a salad and some goat's cheese. This is a very fair sample of the meals we thereafter enjoyed. Although we were in pension, our bill, including tips, drinks, postcards, laundry, and 4 prolonged trunk calls to London, averaged 30 shillings a day each. When we first saw them, the black coils of ancient vines showed only tentative tendrils, but by the end of the month they shaded the terrace from the noon heat and made a canopy of shade for the hen roosts and rabbit hutches. We saw the walnut trees, their gnarled branches mossed like the antlers of a stag in velvet, festooned with black chantilly tassels that turned to bright copper leaves, and then to heavy verdure studded with a glossy green of unripe nuts. The rich purple of catalpa and Judas trees slowly waned as the scarlet cherries waxed in such profusion that Denys seldom went for a walk without someone offering to fill his hat with them. Our ears no longer had to act as sieves to protect us from the grind of traffic, constantly alert to let through only the essential information conveyed by voice or a car hooter or the telephone's insistence. Refreshed by the benison of silence, they could again bring us subtle news, the hot shimmering whir of cicadas, the slow surge of wind in high grasses, the susurrus of poplars, the silver tuning forks of gossiping frogs, and more robust, but still genial noises, roosters tipping wide the curtains of the morning, the clash of saucepan lids, the measured tread of oxen, the creak of the winch which lifts them by a girth for shoeing, and their resonant bellowing when, freed from their yokes, they jostled to the drinking trough to suck water with a luscious squelching into their moist pink mouths. And noises, too, came into their own. It was again instinctive to sniff an unfamiliar plant instead of only to look at its shape and feel its texture, to recognize that a field has quite a different smell at noon and at sunset, and to relish the sturdy smell of cow dung in the strong old streets. Unlike other 12th century villages of this region, with a castle poised for their protection on crest or cliff or crag, Cologne rests like a hare in her form among undulating pastures. Here the nucleus is not a castle, but a monastery, which had already been established for over 300 years when in 1077 Benedictine began building the present Romanesque church. The lovely tympanum over the west door is the keynote of this gentle place. A whole map of this gentle place, a living Christ ascending on the upsurging joy of his attendant angels, while his mother and the 11 faithful apostles converse serenely on the love he hoped to teach them to remember. Many were the pilgrims who rested here on their long journey to the shrine of Saint Jacques de Compostelle, which is in the remote northwestern corner of Spain. All roads lead to Compostelle might once have been an apt phrase, as is illustrated by the map at the Abbey of Conques, which I shall describe later. The pilgrimage played a significant role in England's history, for unless William X of Aquitaine had undertaken it, his daughter Eleanor would probably not have inherited his duchy. Her mother, who had failed to conceive after the birth of a second daughter, Petronella, had recently died, so her father was at last free to marry and beggar a legitimate son. Being renowned for his amatory prowess, Duke William did not go to Compostelle to plead for heavenly assistance in this project, but as a penance imposed on him by the Pope for quarrelling with the irascible ecclesiastic who later became canonized as Saint Bernard, he travelled to Spain with a splendid retinue, and the day before arriving at their destination they encamped by a stream. In it were many fish, and although warned that these were held to be accursed, the Duke ignored the advice and ordered some to be prepared for his supper. He relished the meal, doubtless with a satisfaction akin to that enjoyed by the bold who introduced to gastronomy a fungus previously shunned by more timid mycologists. But during the night he was afflicted with a most grievous flux. However, by the morning he was too weak to mount his horse. He insisted on being carried to the shrine on a litter. If he did so hoping for a miraculous success from his fleshy agonies, he was not disappointed, for he expired in front of the high altar at noon on Good Friday. I stopped this here, the Rose Red Village. Oh no, it's not very long to go. I think I'll continue. As Cologne is in a part of France too remote to have been much affected by the drab waves of parvenu mediocrity, which polluted European taste in the 19th century, it suffered no change except by natural decay, shedding a stone here, a beam there, as trees shed their leaves in autumn. Many of the houses are no longer inhabited, for in 1850 its prosperity finally waned when Messac supplanted it as capital of the canton, Messac, and people drifted on to trade wind to new centres which, although only 2 miles away, had a school and shops. Cologne tried to fight back by acquiring a railway station, a little wooden building on the main road, but the engine was only strong enough to pull an empty carriage uphill, and one hopes that the vanished lines were beaten into ploughshares when novelty no longer tempted passengers to buy a ticket for the glide down to Turin, knowing that they would have to walk home. Now this lovely place is stirring to life again, as it enjoys increasing fame through the devoted energies of Dr. Fages, founder of the Society of Les Amis de Cologne, who warmly befriended us. His chateau of Wassenach has been continuously inhabited since the 15th century, and during the Renaissance was embellished with carving and tourelles. I do not know whether a local craftsman went to the French capital or a carver came from Paris to Cologne, but the Gothic doorway, which opens directly to the wide spiral stair of the hexagonal tower, is identical with the one in the Hotel de Cluny. The last of the Wassenachs, who were seigneurs of Cologne and governors of Turenne, to live in the chateau, was Gillian, an ardent Calvinist who aided Henry de Turenne, Duc de Bouillon, in a conspiracy against Henry the XV. The conspiracy was discovered and Gillian condemned to death, but he managed to escape and found refuge in Sedan. After a while, the king, being a far more generous opponent than his late mother-in-law, Catherine de Medici, granted him a full pardon, with restoration of his lands and titles, so he was able to return home to a tranquil old age. Turenne, as the crow flies, is only 5 miles from Cologne, but so lavish is this landscape folded that roads are complex as veins in a wine leaf, and there are 11 alternative approaches to the capital of the Vicomté, which once encompassed more than half the region now included in the département of the Lot. I think the best views are from the north, by the D8, for they caused Denys and me to get out of the car 4 times to photograph the town from a yet more pleasing angle. The narrow and precipitous street panorama, which can be seen in its entirety from the Tour de César. This, the earliest of the castle's defence works, is a single round tower with a spiral stair, narrow enough to be held by 1 man and lit only by arrow slots. After hearing Denys' enthusiasm for the view, I regretted having been too lazy to follow him to the top, although I had enjoyed gossiping with the gardener, who then took us to see the castle guardroom, the only part shown, as the rest is inhabited. For 900 years the seigneurs of Turenne were independent rulers, owing neither allegiance nor tribute to the kings of France. So the people flourished until 1738, when their happy state declined because their vicomte, to pay his debts, had to sell his feudal rights to Louis XV. Can that be? That the majority of them feel the lack of hereditary ruler with whom to identify, and so nourish the most highly evolved elements in their own characters, was most poignantly demonstrated in Brive on the 6th of May, when every radio and television in the town was the nucleus of silent people, listening intently and often moved to tears by Princess Margaret's wedding. So that was the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 is entitled Close to Cologne. Today is the 16th of October 2024.